start pointing you even going from here to here, and hopefully down the funnel to here. And this is when it becomes useful. This is when it has some utility for investigators. An interesting timeline, and it doesn't show up very well, showing basically the computer criminal typology determination goes back to Jack the Ripper. This actually came from one of the master's students over in the School of Technology, Noble Dean, did his master's thesis on this. He charted really the development through the ages of criminal taxonomies, of the psychological crime scene analysis, and where it's ended up to today. We go from Jack the Ripper all the way up to basically Cantor and the investigative psychology, Brent Turvey and the behavioral evidence analysis, and I'd say 2004, 2006, we're now moving into going from traditional criminal activities to the cyber digital. So that's kind of where we are right now. Part of the psychological crime scene analysis then, or we refer to as PCSA, is looking for important elements. What do investigators need? What assistance can we give investigators? Well, one is obviously the motive. Why did the person commit that crime? Is there evidence at the scene that would allow us to make that determination? What was their MO? We always hear MO, right? Every cop show, it's, oh, what was their MO? Well, that's another tool. That's another artifact. That's another piece of the puzzle we can use. We've got signature behaviors or aspects which help us focus in on the who. We have something called staging behaviors. Contrary to popular belief, criminals can read. They can read these reports. In fact, they've ran into some situations, especially with the dichotomous offender profiling that was very common with the FBI in the early days, is they had this concept of this organized offender. The organized offender was highly intelligent, highly motivated. Well, what they found out was a lot of these highly motivated, highly intelligent people they were investigating knew the model. So they would try to make the scene look like it was disorganized because they had the checklist. Oh, if I do this, if I do that, it's going to make it look like it was disorganized. So a way of kind of fooling this. Also, somebody that was under the influence of drugs, alcohol, who's an organized offender, all of a sudden that crime scene looks disorganized, doesn't it? Because they're impaired at that point in time. So staging kind of makes you look at maybe who didn't do it. If there's evidence of staging, that may be not really that type of person. We also have to look at the victimology, or to whom. These are all elements that we look at. For the most part, the signature behaviors is the ones that probably give us the most reliable information on those personality characteristics. MO can be learned. MO is usually learned. MO can tell you maybe where a person is in their career or within the maturity within that criminal trade craft. People early in the career usually don't have very effective MOs. As they get caught, go to jail, get educated by the people in jail that says, no, don't do it that way. Do it this way next time. They come out the other end a little more educated, and their MOs changes slightly. Signature behaviors, on the other hand, are behaviors that are not necessarily learned, but are those behaviors which really help that person satisfy those urges, those drives, those desires. It's what they get the kick from. They commit some of these activities that we're going to be talking about simply for the kick, and the signature behaviors are those behaviors which allow them to satisfy that need. It's not learned. A lot of cases they're not even aware they're doing that. Signature behaviors would be, an example in the physical world, would be the scenarios they have the victims play out, the way they dress their victims, the script that they have with their victim. Those are part of satisfying this perverse need, this perverse drive, and nothing to do with being successful. In some cases, the signature behavior is stealing certain artifacts, certain trophies. Well, stealing a trophy from a victim and having it in your house when the police come to talk to you is probably not an effective MO for not being caught, is it? But that's part of this. That's part of the pathology they have. That's part of the need to fulfill that drive. Really, these are putting, and this is one of the psychologists in the UK had a great analogy. Psychological crime scene analysis, aka what we used to call profiling, is really like trying to put together a jigsaw puzzle, but you don't have that box to look at. You're not quite sure where all the pieces go together. So how do you know when you're finished? Because hopefully when you put them all together without having to jam the pieces in with a hammer, it actually looks like a tree or a boat or a house, And hopefully that's what it's supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be a sports car. But it can be very difficult because you really don't know what the end picture is supposed to look like. The process for psychological crime scene analysis usually goes from, in our case, collation of case details. Go to the case, what happened? Here it's really a hybrid approach we're talking about here. We have some theories that we can draw on, but we go to the case. Identify salient case points or issues. We have a framework or a theory. That's kind of that inductive portion. We go through that theory. We apply then those theories, those statistics to that unique case. We then develop, really, the individual profile, those characteristics we talked about. Again, remember, though, a picture of that person doesn't pop out the other end. In a lot of cases, they might be fairly generic. Between 25 and 30 years of age. Male. Military service. In an occupation that they don't have a lot of contact with people. These are common terms. These are common characteristics you'll see in these profiles. Well, a lot of people fit that, don't they? It hasn't narrowed it down to any specific individual. But now it's really narrowed it down for the investigator. Okay, I don't have to go look for these 50-year-old ex-cons who just got released from prison. I'm going to maybe focus my concentration in this group. It might be wrong, but at least I have an area to look at first. I can focus my investigation. Let's look at identification of salient issues or points. This is really key. If we get this wrong, the rest kind of is moot. And we'll talk about that in a couple slides. Just keep that in the back of your mind. It's about looking at the proper things. And we're pretty good at doing that in the physical world. We've had a lot of experience, a lot of history. I'd argue that the same stuff is there in the digital world. We just don't have as much experience in going through this. So let's look at how do we use this. Is it really relevant to talk about using something that is, I remember I said it was an art or a science. Yeah, a little vague on that. Is there any use using this, transporting this, repurposing it from the physical to the cyber? And I'd argue, yes, there is. So can we use traditional profiling techniques with non-traditional crimes? Some would argue that even right now, these cyber crimes are fairly non-traditional. Non-traditional in the aspect of these individuals have decided to express their deviant behavior by using technology with the computer targeted, maybe a little bit with the computer assisted. The computer incidental, that's not what we're looking at here. What kind of questions do investigators need? What kind of questions do they need to answer? What are they going to ask? What information do they need? Are there different questions you ask for a cyber crime as opposed to a physical crime? Yes and no. The framework is the same, but obviously it's going to be questions that are couched in technology, questions related to or in the context of that specific case. And really, before we reinvent the wheel, do we already have some of these attacker profiles already developed? Can we go out to the literature and say, oh, great, what do we know so far? And in fact, we can in at least a couple of cases. And really, in the physical world, we have an identifiable crime scene. If somebody was to come into this room, pull out a gun, and shoot me in the foot, where's my crime scene? This room. We have an identifiable crime scene. How about if somebody came into the room, or how about if somebody basically launched an attack on me and planted a virus on my computer? Where's my crime scene now? We'll say it's this laptop. Is it an identifiable crime scene? Sure it is. That's laptop. I can physically see it. I have a digital crime scene that exists within a physical. Now, if that same person came in and shot me in the foot and took off out of the room and got caught basically sitting over in the PMU having a latte by Starbucks, where's my secondary crime scene? Or my secondary scene? The Starbucks. Okay. Let's say that we were able to trace this back to the source. And the source was somebody, I'm Canadian, the source was somebody up in Canada who was bored because it was so cold they couldn't go outside. And that was the source of the attack. Where is my secondary scene?